Hello my dear friends, how have you been? I'm Mario Ferger and today I'm going to talk about European spider goddesses, if there were any. The thing is, this was a question posed quite recently actually by one of my patrons, but well, other patrons of mine have asked me this before, and even here on the comment section of my YouTube videos. You probably think that I do not read your comments, but I actually do, and I take notes. So before we start, let me just tell you that I am not ignoring you in the comments. It's just that right now, every day, I already answer a lot of questions on my various social media. I always answer the doubts, questions, existential crises, and interpretations of the voices inside people's heads constantly on a daily basis through email, on the Patreon platform, various messages I receive. So right now it's just really hard to get back to all of you. So I'm sorry for that. I'm just one person, one single individual, and from time to time I need to sleep. So I apologize for not having a lot of time on my hands to attend all of your needs. But I do try my best to give answers to as much people as I can. Now, let's get to the subject of this video. The questions are often about the existence of European spider goddesses because of the connection between spinning and weaving and the weaving of a spider's web. So there is the general idea that because some goddesses are related to weaving and spinning and also the weaving of fate, they must be related to the spider because, well, obviously, the spider weaves a web. But just because a deity is related to weaving and spinning doesn't mean that that specific deity is automatically related to the spider. And that doesn't also mean that a spider is related to the weaving of fate. Also, do take in mind that a specific cultural reality of one place isn't the same of another. And even though there are certain spiritual and religious perspectives that are almost universal, that doesn't mean that everything is actually connected. There are a lot of cultural realities that have nothing to do with other cultural realities. Much of what lies within a religion or a spirituality, especially when there are animistic roots in such religions or spiritualities, much of the content has to do with the local fauna and flora, climate, natural features, and everything that encompasses that specific geographical reality. So many things are unique to that specific culture living in that specific geographical reality, whose mythologies or the roots and basis of their myths and religions are based on the observance of their physical reality and interaction with that reality and with the supernatural or the perspective of the supernatural of that specific reality. I'm telling you this because there is always the tendency to find patterns and creating links between things that originally were not linked together. And you will understand, I'm sure, you will understand what I'm saying throughout this entire video. Anyway, are there any European spider goddesses? No, there aren't. Not that we know of. Are there goddesses related to weaving, spinning, and fate? Yes, of course there is. But that doesn't make them spider goddesses. There is this general assumption that in old Europe there were spider goddesses, but due to Christianity, such spider goddesses disappeared and we lost information about them, and as such, there are no European spider goddesses. Now, think about this assessment. If such information disappeared, if there is nothing whatsoever about anything of this anywhere, a complete void in human history concerning this, how can someone affirm European spider goddesses existed if there isn't anything that points to any clue about it? It's just common sense. So now I'm going to develop this subject for you, and I hope you enjoy it. So let's get started. Concerning spiders and the weaving of fate, and weaving in general and spinning as a traditional work. I've been asked this before several times, which is why I'm making a video. So in the future, I just have to send the link. There's something interesting going on in Neo-paganism and this idea of spiders and spider goddesses. Some even go as far as to say Loki, a Norse male god, was a spider god, which of course, that's not true. And this probably comes from the Native American mythologies. For instance, to be more precise, in Lakota mythology, the spider is a trickster spirit, not a deity, but a spirit. And so by Wiccan interpretation, and the fact that Loki is related in the written sources to trickery and being a trickster god in general, Loki was associated with spiders among US Wiccan neo-pagans. You see, creating parallels and links with things that originally weren't linked together. But we shall get to it further ahead. Now, when I was researching to make this video, researching on actual written sources, actual books, essays, and archaeological reports, etc., I thought about first Googling this. So the first thing I did was to actually go on Google to try to find and understand this assumption of the existence of European spider goddesses, to try to understand why people have this idea in the first place. So, not surprisingly, I came about several blogs filled with nonsense. I read a dozen of them, and it seems clear to me now that this is indeed a New Age, neo-pagan assumption. I've given you the example of Loki, and I shall give more examples as we go. There was one particular blog that spoke about the Celtic god Sukelos being a spider god because Sukelos is a horned god of the forest and related to weaving. And this alone already gave me indications about the amount of rubbish people believe in. Not because they have specifically made this up right now, but because of neo-pagan religions that in the past 100 years or so have been making stuff up, mostly due to politics and mostly in the attempts to create an identity that never existed, but also an identity that supports obsolete nationalist ideas of the 19th century, trying to create a cultural past with a bunch of ideas as a means of creating evidences just to affirm that we had this before all of you, so we are in the right to control you because your culture comes from our culture. So a lot of parallels were created, forcibly created, that originally never existed whatsoever. So, Sukelos, the Celtic god, being a horned god and god of weaving just isn't true. Sukelos is indeed a god related to the forest, but that's the thing. Just because it is Celtic and related to the forest, that doesn't mean he is a horned god. There were hundreds of forest gods, and none of them had horns. Only a dozen of them, but not all of them. This is a neo-pagan tendency to equate every forest god there is to the god Cernunnos. I've already done a video about Cernunnos, and I explain this precisely. You can see it right here, so no point in repeating myself. However, I must say that Cernunnos is a totally Western European god, often related to the red deer, specifically, which is why he also has those horns. Now, Sukelos, on the other hand, isn't related to a specific animal. He doesn't have horns. He is related to the forest, indeed, but to the function of husbandry, to semi-domesticated animals. As it often occurred in the past, husbandry, for many civilizations, wasn't exactly taking care of fully domesticated animals in a pen, but having semi-domesticated animals in wild places And when the time came, the animals were gathered around for slaughter or culling. It was still like this until quite late in Scandinavia, for instance, throughout the entire Middle Ages, with pigs. The point here is that Sukelos is related to husbandry and with agriculture. This god's most significant attribute, in fact, is his great hammer. Sukelos is called the good striker, and with his hammer he strikes on the earth to propitiate fertility. Sukelos represents the activities that were associated to the male gender in the Bronze Age and Iron Age societies in Europe. Also, Sukelos is generally portrayed as standing with his consort, the goddess Nantosuelta, who carries a dish, which perhaps is a piece of ritual equipment, and also a long pole topped with a house, which might indicate she was a goddess of the domestic affairs. This pair of Celtic gods, very Western European Celtic gods, represent the general gender roles associated with the male figure and the female figure as a couple, and dealing with the social, economic, and religious reality of the rural areas of the late Bronze Age and the Iron Age. The sole fact that Nantosuelta, Sukelos' consort, is related to domestic affairs, for some reason among Neo-pagans, she was associated with weaving and spinning automatically, because indeed it was usually a labor or a work or a job done within the domestic environment. As such, the Celtic god Sukelos is therefore all of a sudden associated with weaving and spinning as well, because of his wife, of whom we don't actually have any indications that she was a goddess associated with weaving. And among these very quick assumptions, without giving a single thought to them, Sukelos became a spider god due to the weaving and spinning that never actually was associated with his wife. So you see the problems we have with such assumptions, right? Anyway, let's take a look at real spider goddesses, but in an European context. Spider tradition and spider goddesses. I remember one specifically of ancient Mesopotamia from Sumer, a Sumerian goddess named Utto, a goddess of weaving and depicted as being a spider. I've already recommended a particular book in the video I've done about Ista, which you can see right here. So if you can check the book Myths from Mesopotamia, Creation, the Flood, the Gilgamesh and others by Stephanie Daly. It's worth the reading concerning ancient Mesopotamian religions and a reliable source for those taking their first steps into this field. Anyway, the point here is that tradition survived among Semitic peoples, especially among Jewish and later on Muslims. Of course, they do not regard the spider as a deity nowadays, obviously, as they have only one god and recognize only one god. But there is still much respect over the spider due to their pagan past and such mythological accounts that eventually got into the later monotheistic religions. Not Christianity, but within Judaism and Islam at least. This Middle Eastern and Near East cultural background eventually was brought into the classical cultural world, Greece and Rome. It's precisely from the Greek word arachne, meaning spider, that the word arachnid comes from. So, speaking of Greece, it's funny because there is a Greek story, a tale of the weaving competition between the goddess Athena and Arachne, which is a sort of spider woman, but not a goddess. This Arachne, spider, is the daughter of a purple wool dyer. Now, This is curious because in the ancient world, those who had the technology and the means to dye clothes with purple were the Phoenicians. The name Phoenicians, to characterize these people, comes precisely from the ancient Greek phoenike, which means specifically purple dye. But not just any purple dye, but the one made in Tyrian, the great city of the ancient Phoenicians, from where the great producers of this purple dye worked at, and their markets sold it all over the ancient world. This specific character, Arachne, spider, who entered in a weaving competition with Athena, the goddess, was precisely from Tyrian, from that city. So this shows a tale brought into Greece by the peoples of the Near East. So this spider woman, a mortal, had probably been a spider goddess before to the people of the Near East. Most likely what remained of the Sumerian Uto goddess, an actual spider goddess. As you know, one of Athena's roles was weaving. She was a goddess of weavers and embroiderers. When someone was good at weaving, people said their gift came from Athena. But Arachne, the spider, came along, a mortal girl and a fine weaver, as she was the daughter of a famous purple dyer, so she knew how to weave. After all, her name means spider, precisely. So she enters in a competition with Athena. Actually, it's Athena that challenges the spider woman. Anyway, doesn't matter the whole story. What matters here is that the spider woman, this spider woman, Arachne, was humiliated and ends up getting the worst of it and hangs herself. And Athena, later on, brings her back to life and transforms her into a spider, an actual spider. And thereafter, this spider, Arachne, works for Athena, continues to weave for Athena. This tale isn't specifically about the spider goddess, but in fact this tale shows the commercial rivalry between the Athenians of Greece and that of the Miletus in Asia Minor. There was much rivalry between Greeks in general and the Phoenicians as well, but also between specifically the Athenians of ancient Greece and the Ionian Greeks of the city of Miletus, of Asia Minor, nowadays Turkey. Athena was not particularly or specifically a goddess of all the Greek people, but specifically of the city of Athens. We have that wrong picture that ancient Greece was a united nation, but it wasn't so. It was composed by city-states, and each had their own administration, their own religion and gods and traditions, culture in general. In the Hellenic world, cultural world, there were similarities, of course, obviously, but no one was subscribed to the same pantheon of gods, and certainly they were not united. Athena was the goddess of Athens, and later on eventually incorporated into a more general pantheon as the Greeks and Greece progressively starts unifications to throw down their foreigner enemies. And later on, when Christians started to write about Greek mythology, they put it all together and created a sort of coherent mythology, a unique mythology that originally wasn't so. So this tale, or this story with the spider woman, this isn't a question of Athena having been a spider goddess or the spider woman being a spider goddess of the Greeks, but just a tale of the Athenians demonstrating that they were better than the Greeks from ancient Lydia, a region in ancient Anatolia, Asia Minor, now Turkey. However, in Miletus, the spider may have been an important figure. Seals with spider emblems have been discovered in archaeology in those parts. Again, probably remoting to that old spider goddess Uto of the Sumerians. Other than this example, spiders and spider goddesses do not occur in European mythology. We don't know anything about that. They are more frequent in Africa and in the Americas, and also Asia, of course. And it's precisely because of the spider cultures of Northern America from Native Americans that US Wiccans, Wicca being a neo-pagan religious manifestation, brought this idea of spider goddesses of Europe, mainly Freya and Frigg and Frau Hol, mainly Germanic goddesses, as goddesses of weaving. But there's nothing historically and archaeologically related to spiders and these goddesses, these European goddesses, and certainly not linked to Loki, as Loki wasn't a god worshipped and he doesn't exist outside literary sources, written sources, with this name at least, Loki. So again, I repeat, there are no European spider goddesses that we know of. There was this sort of spider entity brought into Greece, but wasn't a goddess, but might have been the remnants of an ancient Sumerian goddess, the goddess Utto. There is often that idea that spiders are hated creatures and associated with evil due to Christianity, because Christians were trying to banish the worship of European spider goddesses. Always blame it on the Christians, but not bloody like it. Spiders became a sort of detested animal indeed during the Middle Ages, but not because of Christianity, but because of the common general belief of that time, of that specific period, that all spiders were poisonous. So people feared them, hated them, because they thought spiders were poisonous, all of them. This may be due to the precisely Athenian tale of Athena and the spider woman I've spoken earlier. Athena, the goddess, brought back to life Arachne, probably a Tyrian tale of a Tyrian princess, being the later version of the Utto goddess. Athena transformed her into a spider by using magic, specifically by using the poison called aconite, commonly known as wolf's bane. Very powerful and deadly and very costly. Kids, don't use drugs. Now, Athena, in this tale, plays a sort of alchemist role, dealing with poisons. And maybe this is the origins of the later Middle Ages fear of spiders and their poison. However, I must point out that spiders were not regarded as evil creatures until the 19th century. Before this time, in Europe anyway, people just feared and hated the little creatures because of the belief, the general belief, they were all poisonous. But linking spiders with evil, actually began in the 19th century. For reasons I don't remember right now actually, but I think it has to do with a German or Swiss author. Some novel a man wrote in the 19th century, which thereafter became a great source of inspiration for other books and cinematography, fomenting the role of the spider as an evil creature and working with the devil. So, with this video, I am not denying the existence of spider goddesses and spider spirits in other cultures outside Europe. Rather, I am denying the existence of European spider goddesses. Surely there are hundreds of thousands of gods that were lost in time. The Celts alone, in the Celtic cultural world, had more than 3,000 gods. Impossible to track them all down. It's possible that there may have been a spider deity in Europe, but there simply isn't. There isn't any evidence to that. So we cannot affirm the existence of something when there is no proof of it. In some neo-pagan traditions nowadays, the spider web itself is seen as a symbol of the goddess, and of the creation of life. And in Wicca specifically, in some traditions of folk magic, a black spider is eaten, literally, between two slices of buttered bread, which apparently will imbue the witch with great power. Or catching a spider and carrying it in a silk pouch around your neck will help prevent illness. But my dear friends, This is New Age stuff, mostly created by the Neo-pagan religious manifestation called Wicca, the Northern American branch, taking a lot of religious and spiritual concepts from Native Americans. So just because something like this was created in our contemporary times doesn't make it a reality of the past. Right, my dear friends, I hope you have enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. See you on the next video, and as always, tack för idag.